Good evening, my friends. This is Paul, and tonight I'm going to be re-reviewing to you Paper Mario for the Nintendo 64, this time with video footage. So, in my original review, I reviewed Paper Mario in context with basically just that and Thousand Year Door, with probably a little bit of Super Paper Mario influence. However, while recording this review, I have the knowledge of this, Paper Mario 2, Super Paper Mario, and Origami King while playing a little bit of Sticker Star. So I've seen how the franchise has evolved. I've also played about half of Super Mario RPG, so I actually saw the game that was the prequel to this Mario RPG idea. And so as a result, I'm probably going to be thinking a lot more in the big picture. However, in fairness, at the time this Virtual Console port came out, Sticker Star was the latest games, so comparisons to Color Splash and Origami King are going to be kept to a bare minimum, as obviously Nintendo couldn't look into the future for a future system when making a port on the Wii U. So this Paper Mario game is a lot closer to a proof of concept Thousand Year Door. Now, just in case you've been living under a rock and have no idea what Paper Mario 2 plays like, this is a turn-based RPG set in the Mario universe, where you run and jump in the main overworld, but when you encounter an enemy, it turns into kind of a chess match of sorts, where first Mario and his partner make a move, and then the enemies do. And even though you choose your commands from a menu, you can also press the control stick and buttons at just the right times to add extra oomph to your attacks. So if you pull off a successful jump attack, then Mario will jump on the enemy twice instead of just once. And if you let go of the hammer at just the right time, then Mario will have a more powerful swing. This overall helps the action to sort of feel like an evolution of the Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest games, and make you feel as though you're not just at the battle of random number generators, that you actually have the power to influence a battle by not only your decisions, but by your reflexes as well, which is how a real battle should play out. Now, at first, this game starts out incredibly slow. So slow, in fact, that I'm not even showing you footage of it, because I feared that if I did, it would turn you guys off. Basically, Mario and company have to learn the ability to do the action commands, and so at the start of the game, the battles feel a lot like autopilot. In fact, the very first battle, you basically have to just keep hammering the A button, and Mario will automatically lose. Then you're thrust into another battle that's basically impossible to lose after a whole bunch of dialogue. And then you do get a little bit more choice coming up, but there's still just that element of pressing buttons. If it weren't for that, Paper Mario is otherwise a masterpiece of a game. While it's not nearly as humorous as Paper Mario 2, it's much more situationally serious and not quite as breaking the fourth wall, although there is a pretty funny instance where the game does this near the end, but I won't spoil it for you. However, in Japan this was known as Mario Story, so even though it has really good gameplay behind it, the main focus was making a Mario game with an actual narrative that, while it's still very much a capture the princess, that's not the only thing that is going on. You also have little side stories that tie together each chapter, and even though your overall goal is to save Peach from Bowser, you're also trying to find the 7 star spirits. So instead of just the usual MacGuffin quest, you also have like a village or a civilization that's undergoing a major problem, and solving the crisis will reward you with the star spirit. So you definitely have a very strong save the world, not just save the princess type of vibes, making the narrative feel a lot more grand. Overall, compared to later games in the series, there's a lot more writing and a lot more colorful characters. Now this is the part where people would say, yes, this is back in the good old days when Nintendo actually gave us partners, and we didn't have to just have Mario be the only person along the ride with a companion character giving their narration all the time. In my opinion, this has pros and cons in comparison to the later games, especially Olivia from Origami King. On one hand, it is nice that, like, the partners each have their own set of abilities on and off the battlefield. So, like, Goombario, for example, can bonk enemies with his head, which is a nice throw on the fact that Mario is always bopping Goombas on the head. Now a Goomba uses his head to bop other enemies. And on the overworld, he can give you information about just about anyone and anything that you're standing next to. The downside is that usually after you get the partners, they don't have anything more to say, and they're really more or less gameplay tools to enhance your experience rather than adding to the narrative. So, they're functionally much more useful than the partners in Origami King, but personality-wise, they're a lot more boring. So a lot of the dialogue usually relies on other characters that Mario and company meet along the way that just happen to do the bulk of the talking, with Mario pantomiming and nodding because this game doesn't have voice acting. I don't know why they couldn't get Charles Martinet to reprise his role. I don't know, maybe they wanted to go for a whole storybook vibe, and when you're reading a storybook, the characters don't talk. Usually your mom or your dad will, like, be the voice of the characters. I don't know. Overall, it didn't really bother me, though, as this game's sound effects and soundtrack are really top-notch. At first, it was really jarring going back to this after hearing the amazing big band style that Color Splash and Origami King used. But in terms of the memorability of the tunes, I would say Paper Mario is one of the better soundtracks on the Nintendo 64. As these tunes, if you look at them in context, this is probably the best job that the composer could have done. Although I personally think the battle tune is way too happy and cheerful for being a battle, every other tune is pretty darn nice. The boss battle in Shy Guy's Toy Box in particular, I really love. So while, yes, it's all MIDI and synthesizers, at least the tunes themselves are memorable enough to feel like Mario tunes while at the same time injecting some RPG personality. Now, Mario gains experience points, what a novel concept, for defeating the enemies, and he gets more experience points the higher level the enemy is. And you eventually will get no experience points if you keep defeating weak enemies, so essentially that eliminates the need to ever grind, because eventually you start defeating the Goombas again, and you'll realize since they're not giving you any experience, grinding is completely pointless. It helps the narrative to keep moving forward without feeling like you have to force the game to become easy. Now this is a fairly easy RPG to begin with, but you have ways of offsetting it. After you get 100 star bits, or star points, you have an option of which of 3 stats you want to upgrade. HP, which is how many hit points Mario can take, flower points, which are used to perform special moves, and badge points, not to be confused with the bracelet points in Virtue's Last Reward, that are used so that Mario can use badges. These badges have a whole variety of special effects that they bestow on Mario and his partners. Just to name a few, they can allow you to do a more powerful hammer swing, they can change the sound effects of your attacks, or they can even make Mario's spin dash a lot faster, which makes traversing the overworld much quicker, especially compared to the snail's pace at which he walked in the later games. There's a tremendous amount of customization here, and the game really goes out of its way to make sure that when you do a side quest, you generally feel pretty rewarded, and the badges are usually the rewards in and of themselves. And if they're not, then you can use the star pieces you get to trade for badges. Now, to make sure you're not super overpowered, the badge points will increase in number if the badge is more powerful. So if you have a really wimpy badge, you'll only need maybe 2 BP to use it. But if you have a really powerful badge that causes enemies to consistently miss Mario, then you'll need more. Overall, it not only gives you an incentive to keep battling, but it also gives you an incentive to make this a your Paper Mario type of experience. Rather than playing it the way the developers want to, you can make essentially your own Mario. Even though you can't exactly change his clothes or his hat like you might have been able to in Super Mario Odyssey, you still have the ability to personalize the experience really nicely. Now, do I have anything negative to say about Paper Mario besides the opening, as so many people seem to hold these first 2 games on a pedestal? Well, if you're playing it on the original Nintendo 64, one of my biggest gripes is that you can only save at designated save blocks, and if you forget to do that, then you have to go all the way back. Now, this probably isn't a problem if you're the type of person that plays in long bursts. However, When I had this game, I had a time limit back in the day, and so painfully having to search for a save block, especially if I was in the middle of a difficult battle, was quite an ordeal, and I really wish Nintendo would have incorporated some version of auto-saving. I didn't think that was a thing back in the Nintendo 64 days, but I definitely wish it handled more like Banjo-Kazooie and Super Mario 64, where there were a lot more shorter vignettes. However, if you're playing this on a virtual console, you can save literally anywhere, so that alleviates that issue. I also think that, generally speaking, the characters aren't nearly as funny as they are in the later games, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it leads to the dialogue being a lot more forgettable and more just like, okay, this is good, but it's not gonna blow your mind. That being said, Paper Mario is the type of game that starts out slow and gradually ramps up in amazingness the further you go, with the battles constantly having more complexity without ever feeling overly hard. And you even get to play as Princess Peach a couple of times, which adds a lot to the stereotype of damsel in distress, but rather a damsel that's in distress but still able to help out behind the scenes in her own way, which adds some much needed character to her and Bowser, which has actually leaked into some of the later games in the regular Mario franchise. So I highly recommend this game. There are a couple of moments where it has sort of a proof of concept feel, where it's like, yeah, this is the first Paper Mario, they're still testing the waters, but unlike most proof of concept games that I've reviewed, this one still stands up really well. And despite the very obnoxiously slow opening, and if you're playing it on the original Nintendo 64, the lack of being able to save frequently, this is pretty much an epic masterpiece. And if you can sit through up until you're able to do action commands, you're in for a wonderful time. It's not going to be exactly like the later games in the series, but you can't judge a game in the past for not being like something in the future. So with that, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this new review. Please let me know if you have any comments or questions or anything I left out. And until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, God bless, and stay tuned to this channel for more hacks on how to live your best life. Bye-bye!